So I think sometimes it's good to, look at things that don't really exist anymore, or if they do exist, they're somewhat obsolete. And you can get actually a lot of good marketing insight from them. So there's all this nostalgia for the drive-in movie theater. Just about maybe, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, my dad was, asking me about, why did the drive-in movie theater go away for the most part? And you could totally tell he had nostalgia in his voice. So I totally appreciate that a lot of people still have a lot of nostalgia for this, especially if you're a little bit older and you kind of experience this. I mean, I've never experienced a drive-in movie theater personally, but to be really honest with you, this wasn't really a great idea even from the start. So, and you just have to trust me, sometimes in marketing and in business, something will last for a while, even though it's not really all that great, because there really isn't any other alternative at the time. So it kind of sort of works as a concept for a moment in time. And when you really think about it, the drive-in movie theater really was at its peak sort of a 25-year phenomenon. And that's really not that long in the grand scheme of things. So when you look at the drive-in movie theater, there's a couple of conceptual things that just really aren't all that wonderful. So first of all, it doesn't really work when it's sunny and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So the drive-in movie theater really was something for either at night or, earliest maybe at dusk. Also, think about it like this in terms of weather. So when it rained, what's the value in it? When it snowed, what's the value in it? When it was really cold outside, you had to run your heat. And, the drive-in movie theater at its peak in the 1950s and 60s, everyone in this country at least was driving, really big V8 cars that got like absolutely 0, miles to the gallon. So think of all of that money you would have to spend / waste, to be honest, on gas. As I know gas was dirt cheap then. And look how much of the environment you polluted. I mean, look, I don't want to change the subject here. I'm not Mr., hardcore climate guy, to be honest with you, yet at the same time, that doesn't mean that I don't care about the environment, okay? Those are two different things. So, I mean, think about how much, gas you just wasted. Also, in the summer, so when it was nice out, okay, fine, great. But when it was hot out in the summer, you'd have to run your air conditioning pretty much the whole time you're there. So number one, you're once again burning gas. And number two, okay, so I'm old enough to remember, I was just a little kid in the 80s, but I remember in the 80s, a lot of people still had sort of, big American cars, and cars would overheat somewhat commonly back in those days, throughout the 80s, and I actually remember that. So I could just imagine in the 1950s, 1960s, cars, and in this country it was mainly American cars. What are you going to do? Sit there in the sweltering heat watching a movie with the engine on and the air conditioning on, and you're not even moving, and you're going to tell me that, your car didn't overheat? So if you take all of those things into account, the fact that it's really something for night, the fact that it really doesn't work when there's extreme weather, temperature-wise, the fact that it doesn't really work when it's raining, doesn't really work when it's snowing. I mean, just think about it from, an operator standpoint. I understand that the drive-in movie theater from a cost perspective was cheap to run, and therefore you could offer tickets for cheap. But think about all of that time that you actually are not running your business because you can't. I mean, this is even worse than a seasonal business, to be honest with you. Even if you're, like say a beach town or something, and you really make all your money from May to, or I don't know, mid-April to, second week of October or something, that's even better than this. I mean, this, it seems to me as though it only really kind of works 1/3 or 1/4 of the year at best. Really think about it from that standpoint, it actually is not a surprise that the drive-in movie theater has really kind of, declined, and that's being nice. So I did a little tad bit of research for this. So obviously I need to have some numbers. So it looks like, at least in the U.S., in its heyday, there was about 4,000 drive-ins, and now there are about 300. So that's a drop of 90%, maybe 91, 92%, from 4,000 all the way down to just 300. And by the way, even when, drive-in movie theaters were in its heyday here in the U.S., it was mainly in rural areas. So, I don't want to get all into another subject, although that's also a fascinating subject, and there's nothing wrong with talking about that. But there's also a reason why, this really kind of was more of a phenomenon in rural areas, and really kind of less of a phenomenon. I'm not even talking about cities, but, less of a phenomenon even in the suburbs. So, again, sometimes it's good from a marketing standpoint to kind of not just look forward or look at the present, but also you can learn from seeing what was around in the past and what doesn't really work anymore and why it doesn't work anymore, at least from the conceptual standpoint. But yes, the VCR also kind of helped the drive-in movie theater sort of go away, because now you could watch movies obviously in your house. And I know that there were obviously some interesting things about the drive-in movie theater, but again, from a concept standpoint, from a fundamental standpoint, not just from a trend perspective, from a fundamental standpoint, because when you understand the root of things, then you can apply it to pretty much everything. So conceptually, it didn't really make all that much sense, and it was kind of sort of, it was going to fail. When you have a good business, it evolves. It doesn't just sort of fail and kind of go away. I mean, again, for the most part, this has gone away. And also, one more thing I just wanted to mention. So now that we are sort of in 2021, and since last year, people have been talking about the drive-in movie theater has sort of been making a comeback. It's not making a comeback at all, folks. That's just, what that is? That's media lingo. That's just media terminology, because when you put that in the title of an article, that's how you basically get people to read the article, okay? So it's not making a comeback. If it has shown some degree of interest, and that's spiked over the past year because of COVID, well, it's because of COVID. And it's going to go away, if it hasn't already begun to go away, by the way, because, there's some movie theater chains that are opening up more and more. So it's not coming back. I hate when the media does this, because there are really sincere people out there like you that want to really understand and learn marketing, and then these stupid journalists, who are like half a journalist at best, they write these stupid articles, and then, people see them, and naturally they get intrigued by them, but they're very misleading, okay? So the drive-in movie theater is not making a comeback. If there's a temporary phenomenon, that's the, key term there, temporary. So now from a marketing standpoint, some of the fundamental reasons why the drive-in movie theater, although I totally respect there's a lot of nostalgia behind it, why it really essentially didn't last the test of time. So send me your comments and questions, and each week you'll get a chance to win a copy of one of my books. Your choice, either my book on presentation skills or business writing skills.